Good evening. Welcome to the Wednesday, February 15th, 2017 Public Works Advisory Board meeting. Vice Chair Stephen Shively is not available this evening, and we have no chair, so we do have 5 members here. I guess the first order is to select a temporary chair for this evening.
I suggest you, Rick.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. So we do have a quorum. We are called to order. Let's take a moment of silence. Are there any announcements this evening? Anyone? Okay.
Actually,
Okay.
maybe most people probably know in town, but Highway 41 is back open, and I was going to see if maybe the staff wanted to give any information on that.
Highway 41 opened on Friday late afternoon, full opening for the weekend, although they are working during the week, doing a 1-lane closure in each direction, so you may have to wait a few minutes there, but it is open and you get through. Saves you 12 or so miles off of your drive. I know that's what it saves me, so I'm glad to see it open. And I think they said the working closures will happen over the next couple of weeks. I noticed this morning they weren't working out there, but they probably will be doing some. I noticed they still need to do some finish work on that netting that they placed on the slope over the next couple of weeks. Thanks.
No other announcements. There are no presentations this evening, and we now have the election of officers. I was thinking that this was going to occur next month after we possibly had a new member so that we would be at full force, but so we have a chair and a vice chair to select, is that correct?
Yes, and you do have the option of continuing this if the board feels that you would have a better showing next month. You'll at least have one more regular member here.
Is there any interest in continuing this?
I would like to continue it until next month
Okay.
and see who we have.
I don't think we need to vote on this. There is no opposition.
So at next month's meeting, would we possibly have the additional 7th member selected by then, or do we know when that's happening?
The interviews
I don't.
Closes on the 22nd.
Of February. And I believe the interviews might take place the first week in, just a second, let me look on my calendar. I think I was invited to that meeting. Bear with me. Advisory board meetings would take place the night before. Advisory board interviews would take place the night before, so there is a possibility we could have that member there if they can make it down to the clerk's office the next day and get sworn in. Yes, there is a possibility that could happen.
Okay, well, the consensus is that we'll continue the election of officers at least until the next meeting. We'll now open public comment period, and anyone wishing to make comment to the board on items other than on the agenda may step forward now. And there is no one stepping forward, so we will close public comment period. Item A1 on the consent calendar, approval of minutes of the January 18th meeting. Are there any comments or corrections on the minutes as presented?
Yes, my last name is misspelled.
It should be E-R-W-I-N, is that correct? Okay.
It's correct farther on down.
Okay, with that correction, I would move that we approve the minutes as presented. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
All those in favor, say aye.
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 All those opposed, say nay. Motion carries 5-0. Business item B1, Director's Report.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, may I ask the board's indulgence in rearranging the agenda and taking item B4 first, so that Mr. Graham may leave after that item rather than being at the end of the agenda?
Sounds like a good idea to me.
Okay, so
Unless there's
sorry.
any objections by any of the other board members, we'll just move directly to B4. Okay. B4 is review recommendations from adopted parking management plan. Take it away, staff.
Okay, so City Council reviewed this item last January and recommended that it go to various advisory bodies. It's gone to Planning Commission, and now it's on to the Public Works Advisory Board. Mr. Graham was so gracious in sharing his PowerPoint that he took to Planning Commission. I stole it and changed a couple of abbreviations from PC to PWAB, so it should look very familiar to him. The parking management plan was adopted about 10 years ago, October of 2007. I think it was like my third or fourth council meeting that I attended where they adopted that plan. Items that we have implemented from the parking management plan were some directional signage changes that we did, and then also trolley route changes. We've also added 200 parking spaces around the city. The Triangle Park, just to our northwest, downhill from us. We've restriped the downtown with giving the T's in areas of the commercial district that didn't have T's before, so better delineating parking, and then changed the parking just to the south of us on Market Street to perpendicular parking to be consistent with the Beach Street specific plan, which was 1980s, 87, I think that was adopted, and with direction to restripe Market Street and do some improvements in Surf Street with different parking. We've done Market Street. We need to do some sidewalk improvements before we can do Surf. Items that were recommended in the parking management plan that were not implemented, having a parking information page on the city's website, create a shared parking program where different land uses on the could share parking. For example, might be residential parking overnight and then commercial during the daytime, employee parking program, delivery truck parking in the Embarcadero So as you've probably noticed, if you've ever been on the Embarcadero during the daytime, sometimes there's a delivery truck parked right in the middle of the lane unloading, and folks are very tentative to go around that with limited width on the opposing lane of traffic. Also, angled parking in the downtown was one of the ideas. Look at altering the time parking limitations and to look at adding paid parking. Some of these things were discussed last night in the goals and objectives meeting with council, and the paid parking is one of the issues that will have made it into our objectives as a study option for looking at parking options. And then looking at private-public partnerships, public-private partnerships on undeveloped property for parking. So those are the things that were in the council-adopted parking management plan that haven't been done, and we were looking to implement some of these in the short term.
Rob, is there a time that the delivery trucks have to be out of there? Is it 10 o'clock or 9 o'clock or 11? They have to be out of the Embarcadero?
No, there's no restriction to parking.
Have we looked at that?
It was looked at in a few years ago, and the merchants, and I think they continue to say this, is because Morro Bay is a small fish, that they deliver to their bigger clients first, and they come to Morro Bay after they're done. So they come here when they come here, and they can't. We can't compete with some of the bigger cities.
Yeah, that stands to reason, and perhaps some other area that they could park in that doesn't block the streets downtown would help. And I don't know, I mean, you've looked at some different ways to do that.
The Centennial Parkway plan does show and identify on the water side of the Embarcadero designated delivery truck loading and unloading opportunities. So we see that plan was adopted by council in January. So moving forward, there's the potential, over time that we would implement that potentially. So
The parking management plan looked at creating commercial loading and unloading zones, especially on the Embarcadero, on the perpendicular streets to Embarcadero. So the first spot, as you would turn going back easterly, might be a yellow commercial loading and unloading zone, probably similar to the way other cities have done it. It would be commercial loading and unloading during typical business hours, but after hours would convert to a regular parking space, wouldn't be restricted after hours. I think, outside of the area that we're looking at doing the Centennial Parkway improvements, that might be an option for delivery truck parking. Although some of those streets are pretty steep and might have an issue with, for example, Harbor might be a difficult one too, although it's flat down at the bottom. So. Council gave us direction.
Rob?
Yeah.
Excuse me, could I go back for a second? When you mentioned Surf Street on the previous portion, could you clarify exactly what parts of Surf Street you were talking about, future improvements or parking?
Basically, this block right here in front of the Vets Hall, where it was in the Beach Street specific plan, had a street section that was identified that had some sidewalk improvements, and then angled parking, I believe, on both sides of the street. But it would require us to install sidewalk on the other side of the street. So we're trying to put together funding before we would do the parking improvements.
Would this go all the way up to Market Street or just to the first street there?
I believe it just goes to West,
West Street.
or Scott, whatever the first one is
Yeah.
there.
West, yeah.
West.
Okay. Jan?
So you're talking about a sidewalk from the steps up to West? And then diagonal
The
parking?
sidewalk would go all the way to Market.
Okay. But the diagonal parking wouldn't go all the way to Market, is it only to West?
I would have to look at the specific plan to be certain. I'm not sure of the limits of it, and I haven't looked at it probably in several months, so.
Only because there was, in this that I was reading, the diagonal parking didn't really work on streets that had a lot of driveways. And are there driveways right across the street? There are several.
There's a couple
There's a
driveways
couple
there.
right across
Yeah.
the street. I know because I have to avoid parking when I come to meetings. Yeah.
So it'd be something that we would, before we move forward with it, developed a construction plan and accommodated those driveways.
What size delivery trucks do we usually see down on the Embarcadero?
Typically the bobtail size trucks, so not typically a lot of semi trucks. Occasionally you'll get so something with perhaps a 25-foot box on the back of a like a 10-wheeler
So
chassis.
like a 40-foot truck?
Yeah.
Okay. So does that specific plan showing the parking, would that allow for, say, bobtails, but, or would it be a smaller vehicle?
It accounts for them, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I got a email, which I suppose everybody else got, about, I guess, neighbor on the street here complaining about bizarre things happening around here. I don't think it's something we would normally review. Is that going to go to city council and planning commission?
It may. It depends if the item gets agendized by council or by staff. So I believe the city manager's office is reviewing that email, and there may be something going to city council on that.
Thank you.
Rob, is there any regulation on the length of truck that can pull into the Embarcadero at a given time? Are 20 foot's allowed up to 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock and so on? I think,
No restriction.
should there be?
I'm trying to figure out how to not run afoul of interstate commerce regulations. The way the city of San Luis did that was reducing the curb return radius to 5 feet, so it becomes difficult to navigate, and trucks only do it once.
I know they take down to Associated Pacific or further down to
Right.
boat launch larger trucks, so you wouldn't want to fully
Right.
restrict it.
So that, typically, if somebody asks us for a truck route, usually we try to get them to come down Pacific or Marina, rather to avoid going right through the middle of the busy commercial district on the Embarcadero, especially with an oversized load.
Are the wishes of the businesses on Morro Bay Boulevard and Embarcadero clearly understood, or is it a guessing game?
I'm not sure there is one wish from if there is a consistent desire. Maybe Scott has a better answer.
So I don't know if it's better, but so when we did the Centennial Parkway plan and the Embarcadero widening plan, the Embarcadero widening component of the plan was to widen the Embarcadero sidewalk, and then it removed parking from the east side of the street and created loading and unloading zones for both automobiles and for trucks. As part of the outreach that we did for that, we had both a workshop and stakeholder interviews with various business owners, and all of them liked the idea, of having wider sidewalks and having designated truck unloading zones, so you don't have 2 and 3 of them parked in the street on the Embarcadero with traffic backing up and you having to go around them. So they favored that. Some of the other things that, we're going to continue to be presenting here to you, haven't necessarily been vetted through them in some time.
Thank you.
So council direction from January last year was to consider implementing angled parking in the downtown based on the PMP, loading zones on the Embarcadero as part of the Embarcadero Widening Project, research the parking options, and then review with the appropriate boards, and that's what we're doing tonight here, reviewing with appropriate boards. So angled parking options. These exhibits are from the 2007 Parking Management Plan. I believe there are exhibits in your staff reports also. Angled parking on Morro Bay Boulevard. So the no north arrow on here. I'm trying to orient myself.
Go the other way, just couldn't show it. It was too squished. Between Monterey and Maine.
Between Monterey and Maine, angled parking on one side of the street, retaining the parallel parking on the other side. The other sections of angled parking are Main Street between Harbor and Morro Bay Boulevard. Again, the same parking configuration, angled on one side, parallel on the other. And then Monterey Avenue between Harbor and Morro Bay Boulevard, a similar parking configuration. Another idea is to, this is reflective of the Pismo Beach approach on Pomeroy, is it? Price Street, to add that angled parking to the middle of the street. Issues with angled parking is how to accommodate bike lanes and cyclists, where you have bike lanes on the inside of the parking and the outside of the parking, or provide share rows for shared access. Here's an example of a bike lane in between the back-in angled parking and a sidewalk. Back into angled parking is one of the ideas that I personally favor. I like the approach of exiting in a forward direction so your attention is drawn to where you're going to as you're trying to quickly leave your parking spot. Back in angled parking with a bike lane on the outside of the parking stalls. Here's a green bike path that is behind forward in angled parking stalls. Sharrows on a street that has back in angled parking on one side and parallel parking on the other. And then sharrows in more a conventional forward in angled parking.
Rob, the people that work down at the Embarcadero or work in the area, do they have a designated place to park, or do they just find a parking place wherever they can?
Typically the closest spot to where they need to get to their job. I think that's anecdotally, that's what we hear is where the employees park. No, there is no designated employee parking.
Perhaps there should be. Perhaps we should think about if you work down there and you're on the street for an hour, or hour and a half, that's okay, but if you're there for many hours, you should park at in a designated for employee parking lot.
That is one of the options on the table to look at. I think it's a difficult thing to enforce unless you have timed and metered parking. Typically, employees don't want to have to run back out to that meter to feed that meter as, if they're working for 4 to 8 hours. I've seen that in other cities where that's how you enforce where employees park. And then there's maybe free parking or less expensive parking on the, not in the high demand area.
Rob, I got a question on the back-end parking. I like the idea, but how, being that we're in more of a tourist town, so people may be unfamiliar with the situation, I mean, have you seen it applied in tourist towns? I'm seeing people pulling up, getting ready to back in, and someone all of a sudden right on their tail.
Nevada City, it seems to work there. And I think it's on the main drag in Nevada City, is back in angled parking. The place where I first saw back in angled parking was a trip to Japan, but I think probably, without being offensive to anybody, that culture is more compliant to rules than perhaps we are here.
But that is an issue that Chris mentioned, but people coming up, pulling up behind you, and you're planning to back up. Is that in Nevada City? Did you notice if that was an issue?
I didn't see that as an issue. So you would pull up, signal, and then back into the space.
One concern that I have is that we get vehicles of all sizes. A lot of cars are bigger and bigger nowadays, and the spaces would have to be able to accommodate that for being able to back in to lines that you may or may not be able to see. If you happen to have one of those little televisions in your car that have rear view sighting, then you can see the lines behind you. But otherwise, like I backed in my space tonight, it's really difficult backing into a diagonal space that using mirrors, especially if there's any weather conditions that are going on, being able to see those lines.
On the other hand, it's difficult to back out if you pull into like in Ventura, in Old Town Ventura, they have pull-in front parking. And I was there on a Sunday, and it was just really good, a lot of traffic. And I was wondering, how do the people get out of those parking places? With so much traffic on the street, the lights were slow, But so that's another issue to look at too. How do you get out of the parking place?
Yeah. The traffic tends to slow down when you have those scenarios where you have traffic running along. Like example, I was in Pismo when we implemented the center lane parking on Price Street, and everybody's like, "Oh, this isn't going to work. You're going to have a million accidents, and it's going to be terrible." We implemented it for 6 months for half of the street, and the other half of the businesses that were down the street were like, "When do we get ours?" Because what happened is, and you have those are visitors that are using it, people just got accustomed to driving slower down there. You just couldn't zip down. You have to drive slow, and there's people walking around to get over to their cars and walking from one side of the street to the other. Just everybody slows down and is paying attention. So it seemed to work pretty good, and we didn't have much in the way of fender benders or anything, or car and pedestrian accidents or anything like that. So it seemed to work fairly well. That's pulling front, forward, not and then backing out into the lane of travel as opposed to backing in. But it worked pretty good, and that's an example that readily familiar with.
Plus, they put stop signs in it too. There's stop signs virtually every block going down.
We did add stop signs. When we added it to one of the streets, I think, and then we created a little bit later on. We created a one-way couplet through there, so that changed traffic patterns a little bit. But that was for another reason, having to do with the parking.
Have you been aware of the Dutch solution of putting like a living room on the street, causing everybody to take their time to make sure they know what's going on?
In the windows?
No, I've never seen that.
There's one of the things the traffic planner says, well, if you surprise people, they're going to slow down. And so what he figured out was, okay, let's put couches and chairs, and it worked very, very well.
On this model that we have for Market Street, where there's a center lane parking, you would pull into the parking lot front, right? I'm sorry, I'm ahead.
Let's get back to...
And then you'd pull out frontwards too, right? You would just go right on through?
No, that'd be only if it were one way.
You have to have one way, yeah, the traffic would have to be the same way on both
Oh.
sides, because you'd be pulling into opposing traffic if you went forward.
So it's not like one way on one side and the other way on the other side?
It is one way on one side and the other way on the other side.
So if you pulled in one way, you could...
You would be opposing traffic if you continued
Oh, I
straight
see.
through.
Yeah,
You'd have to
yeah, okay.
back out, yeah.
I do have a question on that also. I'm guessing we would have bumpers there so that you wouldn't pull all the way through, but in one of the diagrams, I'm not sure whether it was on this one, are they staggered so that people going, north have every other space and people going south have every other space? Or is it just they're all open and anybody can pull in from either side?
You would usually have parking, stops at the end of them, so you can't pull into the opposing lane of traffic.
Okay.
Pull back from the edge of them, so you have a 2-foot overhang typically. So
Right.
yeah, it would be like that. That's how you implement it. That's how we did it. That's the example on Price Street. If you went there, that's what it looks like.
And I think on Price Street, also half the block, don't you enter from one direction and half the block?
It alternates. That's correct.
It alternates. Not every other space, but
Okay.
like half the block.
Yeah, half the block. So that side, that section over there is facing one direction, and the front section you're coming to faces the other way. So
Okay.
it provides parking for both directions, though.
Okay. I just wasn't able to see it clearly on the map here.
So what we're hoping to get out of this discussion is basically that. Discussion items, concerns that this board might have that we can forward back on to City Council with. Really, the first emphasis is on this revised parking layout. And the reason that we were looking at doing this is to, perhaps increase the parking stock by, a additional third parking by doing this angled parking.
Okay, I guess we'll get back to us asking staff some more questions, but we'll sort of go down the line like we normally do. So we'll start with Stu tonight. And you can ask your questions first, and we'll work our way down.
I do spend some time in Pismo because one of my sons lives there. And I would say that their plan there works pretty well once people got used to what's happening. The issue is, of course, breaking up the segments so that you get to park, east going one direction, and in the next block it's west, and so on. But it seems to work pretty good for them, and they don't seem to charge for it either.
Yeah, that area, at least as of 2.5 years ago, they didn't. I don't know what they do now. But I didn't see any. I drove down there about 2 months ago. I was driving down Price. I didn't see any kiosks or anything, any parking kiosks, and so that's what they have. The parking kiosk tickets down more towards the pier, and for the parking lots down there and not on the street, they have those. And they had a couple of also paid parking lots that are sort of in the downtown area. But I think it is free over there still.
And to revisit the people that work down there, I wonder what percentage of the people that work down there use those parking places. Have we got any idea? Is it 10% or is it 20 or is it?
So some of the spaces are taken up. At least when I was there was not a parking program put in place for those. In the areas where there was paid parking, what it ended up doing is pushing the employees out to the fringe. Some of them would park in some of the outer lots that we had, certainly, but it didn't have them in the immediate center of the downtown, focused around the pier area. That area was mostly all paid parking, and so it would push them to the fringe, to some of the fringe lots that were out there.
It seems to me that should be one of the elements of this parking thing down there, is we need to move the people. There's got to be 10 or 20% or maybe more than that of the people that The cars that park down there are employees that work down there. And of course, if they're moved someplace else, that's not too far away. That would enhance the business. It would give us more tax revenue and some other things, so.
Yeah, when we went through the process of doing that and then implementing paid parking, I mean, that was a tough road to hoe to begin with. The business owners didn't like it, then they loved it because it was turnover. The person didn't go park their car there in front of their business and then go down to the beach and sit on the beach for 4 hours. That space would turn over. People would be hanging out there for a while, but they wouldn't hang out there all day. And then again, we had parking on the fringe that was free, so if people wanted to stay and go to the beach and hang out for a while, that was fine. Or you go park in one of the lots. The ones in the lots was cheaper, so we made so we incentivized parking in the lots if you were going to hang out for a while. If you wanted to just go pick up something, those are a little more expensive, but you could get in and get out, and there's a lot more turnover on those spaces. So you do have to sort of think through how and where you want that, and the business owners like to have more turnover because that's more customers for them. So it ended up being, for mostly, a positive, and I believe it still is. I mean, literally when I left 2.5 years ago, we'd had it implemented for several years, and I regularly walked around down there and talked to business owners, and those were one of the things I regularly asked them, and they seemed to appreciate it. They liked it. So
We could also provide trolley delivery. They could park over at the Rock or someplace that's farther away and bring them down at a regular interval, along with consumers that are spending money here too. So that's something to consider also.
That's one of the things that was implemented with the parking management plan, is to run that Embarcadero trolley route with I think it has a half an hour headway from one end to the other. So it runs back and forth along the Embarcadero and runs up either Pacific or Harbor to intersect with the north and south route right about the top of the Centennial Stairway there, and then back down on the Embarcadero.
So that doesn't go up to Main Street now then and go down Main?
There's another trolley route that runs that.
Okay, all right.
So we have 3 routes basically in the summertime.
And then, of course, we need to identify those routes for the people coming to visit us and say, here it is, and you don't have to drive your car.
We need to do a better job of identifying those. We do publish the map on the website, and it is at all the trolley stops showing those route maps. All the marked trolley stops.
Okay, that's all I have.
Okay, Chris?
Yeah, I'm in favor of angled parking. Actually, a few years back, I had a project where we proposed angled parking on Market. And I'd probably be more for the front pull-in style, just because I can see issues with backing in and having people unfamiliar with how the operation works if they're just coming through town. And actually, if parking's busy enough, really the way you'll get out, I think, is the fact that person wants your spot, and they're going to wait and let you back out. They're kind of looking for people as they're getting in, I think. The issue I see is just figuring out the bicycle application. Though now when I drive down the streets downtown, the streets kind of seem a little narrow as it is. I think even though they technically don't have their lane, but if they're on the side, it's just as hard to maneuver. I think the Sharrows might actually function better with some of this angled parking and the fact that possibly traffic would slow down. I like the center aisle angle parking. I can see where that works a lot, where we have if we have a lot of driveways. Though obviously if there's long stretches, like I think some of the Morro Bay Boulevard areas, there may not be some driveways in a few of those areas. We'd obviously get more stalls if we can put them on both sides. But I think if we can fit them down the middle, it kind of opens up the sidewalks a little more too. It makes it feel a little wider, open space, because you don't have a vehicle right up against the sidewalk. So I think I'm in favor of moving forward with angled parking. I think it's just dialing in how we deal with bicycle traffic and pedestrian traffic.
Okay, John, would you like to start on this side?
Sure. My personal opinion is parking, and whatever efficient way you do it, the traffic will figure out what they have to do. I've got questions of if we have to hire a meter maid, what's that cost? And would the fees collected cover that position? And let's see now, there was that. And to do some of these center or back end, what's the increased cost for wheel stops and things like that compared to standard pulling?
We haven't done any detailed design or estimating on this as of yet.
The first comment that you had about the, how do we, if we put in implemented paid parking, yeah, I mean, you have to have enough of it to where it pays for employees to monitor it. I mean, that we had to figure that out when I was in Pismo. Usually they're not super high paying jobs, and they're part-time personnel that you hire for it. And we were able to, I think on the weekends, we'd have 2 of them go on at a time, and I think we ran a couple of different shifts while we were doing it. I think total, they had part-time employees, as many as 7 or 8 of them at any given time under the parking management section that they have now. There may be even more now because it's busier down there now, so I don't know, they may even have more, but I know they had at least 8 at one point.
What was the total wages for that?
I don't recall off the top of my head. That wasn't operated by my division. We had a separate parking division.
I do not want a part-time job, Janice. Okay, but like I say, the only issues I've got there is it's more of the economic analysis.
Just one point about tourists versus locals knowing how to do it. In my view, you shouldn't have to have been to a location to know how to navigate the streets. It should be signed and marked clearly enough so that you don't have to guess how to drive something. I know that was, I'll bring up another, the fear of the roundabout. People wouldn't know how to drive it. But I think a properly signed roundabout is pretty easy to drive. You look left and you drive right. It's pretty easy.
You obviously have not driven around Massachusetts.
Jan?
Okay, I don't see any reason why we can't do this, the diagonal parking either. And looking at these, when I was reading, looking at these maps on Main Street and Monterey and everything, it looks workable, like there's space. But when I was reading online about the parking management plan, and there were some letters, or maybe it was in here, the letters that it was done in before on Monterey, and that people didn't like it. That was before I moved here. What was the issue with that? Was it on both sides of the street, or was it?
It was a one-way street. They turned it into one.
Couplets, right? Is that? Sorry. It was one-way couplet, I believe. I was just a visitor. I'd come over here to Morro Bay to visit my now wife, but I remember driving down them, but I don't remember what the issues were with the angled parking and why it was removed. I know it was put in as a test project and then removed sometimes later. And I don't remember any of the details of why.
Was it on both sides of the street? Is that
Yes.
So did it crowd maybe the street wasn't wide enough for it? Because on here, you're just having regular parallel parking on one side and angled parking on the other. And that's assuming the street is wide enough to accommodate that.
Yeah, I don't think you would have to go to a one-way street to have angled parking on both sides.
Okay, so maybe that was the issue.
I think that was the issue.
And
It really confused people because they were so used to going down both ways on that
Yeah.
street.
And I don't think there was a couplet there. It was only one-way street. It wasn't coupled with another one-way street coming back the other way, like Marsh Higuera in San Luis is a local example of a one-way couplet.
Okay, and then
Sounds familiar.
I'm also concerned about the bike lane. On these maps, we have this red line down on Monterey Avenue, and what is that? The red line down the center of the road? on Monterey and on Main Street. Is that, you see the red line beside the center line? Oh, that.
I think
okay.
that's shifting of the center line over.
Oh, okay, because I was thinking that wouldn't be the bike lane there. would- And the one, I actually like the idea on Market Avenue where you put people in the middle, and it was suggested that at one time that be where employees be encouraged to park there. And that sounds like a very reasonable plan to me. So, it's not wide enough to have 2 lanes of angled parking in the middle, is it?
I don't think so.
Okay.
No, it's not.
So these plans all look good to me. And I was reading 2007 this was passed.
2007.
Just takes a while for the gears of government to work.
2007 is about the time when we're implementing pretty drastic cost-cutting
I see.
measures. And I don't think some of the councils at that time prioritized the parking management plan as an issue that they wanted staff to work on.
Then the other thing, speaking of cost cutting, this is not really it made it sound like this was not really a major cost thing because you just said resurfacing and restriping. So it's not rebuilding any roads.
No, it's not reconstructing anything. Some of the issues will be how you accommodate the ADA parking, because there is a requirement to, include on-street ADA parking now. So accommodating that might be a challenge with some of these scenarios.
Yeah, you
But-
can easily take the end pieces and connect them to the crosswalks, but going in any further gets a little difficult without a crosswalk.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Can't go behind cars.
Yeah, and the existing standard for on-street ADA parking is where, for an existing street, is you take basically the end space closest to the curb ramp, sign and put pavement markings on that, and you use the curb ramp for the access point. For new construction, you're actually constructing a lowered sidewalk in that section where the sidewalk flushes out. There's the only example I've seen of that constructed is in Oxnard. If you're ever down there and go to the Whole Foods there's some on-street disabled access parking there that I probably have a couple pictures of that if anybody's interested. Because that's what I do when I'm at places, take pictures of wastewater plants and parking spaces.
And then my next thing, you said that angled parking would increase the parking spaces by about a third?
Probably by about a third. If we could do both sides of the street, you'd gain a little bit more. But and that's assuming that you could probably park at I believe they're assuming a 30-degree parking angle there.
Oh, okay.
I like the idea on the Market Street. And on the Morro Bay Boulevard, is there a reason why we also don't include the section between Napa and Monterey? Is it too steep at that location? Because I don't believe there's any driveways that would interfere on that stretch.
I don't believe there's really, these are just illustrative examples of locations where this could take place.
Oh, okay.
I don't think they're limiting designs.
Okay.
So we could run angled parking really almost anywhere on the boulevard where there's not driveway constraints.
Okay. I remember years ago when there were no stop signs along Morro Bay Boulevard, and it was sort of a downhill racetrack, whether you wanted to do it or not. All the stop signs, the four-way stops, have helped dramatically in slowing traffic down, and I think that definitely assists in angled parking besides the current perpendicular parking. Being a bicyclist, when the traffic's flowing fast, that's normally because nobody's parked anywhere and nobody's stopping for anything. Let's see. Sorry, I got distracted there. So I haven't had an issue, bicycling in town with traffic going too fast, either on the Embarcadero or along Morro Bay Boulevard. Sometimes Main Street, it gets a little busy between a couple of the blocks, but I think that could be addressed also. So I think bicycle sharing of the road would be sufficient without having, special bike lanes. It would be nice to have bike lanes if we had enough space for all of that.
The other option besides the Sharrow is the new MUTCD sign. You see them in a few locations. Bicycles may use, full lane. Paso has a few of those signs up. It's what is probably going to replace the Sharrow.
Mm-hmm.
I know this, Rob, down at the Rock, which I go to frequently, there's many people down there that really don't speak English at all. They're Italian, they're German, they're Spanish, and so on. And of course, we have to design something that those people can understand without having to get in trouble with their parking. And so that's another issue, is the language, the barrier that we have.
That happens in every country with all foreign tourists.
Luckily, we do design to standards. So you'll notice in Europe they have a multi-sided stop sign that says stop on it, in a lot of places, just like we do in the U.S. Japan, I think it's an upside down triangle, but I didn't try to drive in Japan. We do design to standards that are, while not universal around the world, we do have common elements.
Okay. I have reservations on the idea of paid parking, and besides the expense, I don't think it would pencil out, but I haven't really seen any of the numbers. I think during the off-season that paid parking will probably discourage a lot of the locals or questionable tourists stopping here versus in Cayucas or something like that, a little further, because people do like to stop. They like to get out of their cars and visit not just the restaurant, but just wander around and not have to worry about getting back to the meter. And I know technically on a lot of the meters, you're not supposed to keep feeding it money. They normally are. You're there for your 60 minutes, and then you're technically supposed to leave. So I don't know how we would get involved in a lot of that type of enforcement or not. I understand that it may discourage some employees from parking right there at where they work, or parking 2 businesses away so that their business is not affected by it. But I just don't see it being positive for a year-round operation. And if you're going to have paid parking, you got to have it year-round. Otherwise, people are just going to get confused as to, are we in season or off season for these meters? But during the slow periods, do you really want to be charging and, having the expense and possibly just, making this an unattractive place? I think Pismo gets a tremendous amount of people down there because of their close proximity to the beach where their business area is. Our business area isn't close to the beach. And I think that makes a big difference for those really long time periods that people may park and be there all day. But 2 or 3 hours, if you want them to be here because they're going to be going to the restaurant, they're going to be going to this shop, that shop, this attraction, all in that area. If they're wanting to be at the beach or do other things, they're going to be parking someplace else. So I think those are really important things to consider when you're thinking about, well, what kind of impact is it going to be on the businesses? Because I think they'll suffer in the off season.
I agree with Rick on that too. But you can take and put an hour limit on it, or 2 hours, or 3 hours, or 4 hours. You can do something so that the parking places are turning over, so fresh people can come in to trade at the businesses on the Embarcadero and so on. So it's something that needs to be managed and thought of before you implement it.
Okay. Are there any other comments or questions from staff? We haven't opened it up to the public yet. We can. If there's no other questions at this time, we'll open it up to the public if they would like to ask a question or make some comments. Now is the time. Seeing no one approaching the podium, we'll close it to public comment. So at this point, do you have enough information? Is it necessary for us to make a specific recommendation, or what are you looking for, Rob?
I think this is sufficient.
I think this is sufficient. We can summarize these comments and package them up with our staff report. So, if I may, I will go through maybe not verbatim what I heard from each of you, but general themes, perhaps. Okay. For the most part, pull-in angled parking is favored rather than back-in angled parking if we're going to do angled parking. But the issues with angled parking is the devil is in the details, and we want to see more, perhaps, more design information on how this is going to work and what the costs might be to implement that. I think we'll see that moving forward with the latest objective that we have for this next year. Couple of concerns with paid parking. It could discourage folks in the off season, and would it pay for parking enforcement? And that there may be other ways to deal with employee parking, such as enforced timed parking. Those are kind of the general theme. Bicycling with the sharrows so that you can use the whole lane where there's angled parking. That's kind of the themes that I heard. Did I capture what the board feels on that?
Nobody has any disagreement, it looks like. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was good input. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott.
So we'll bid adieu to Mr. Graham and move back to item B1.
Item B1 is the director's report. Take it away.
So we yet again changed the format and didn't attach the raw maintenance supervisor comments. We embedded that into the report.
Very nice.
Took the opportunity to make some grammatical changes to the raw reports for a little bit of more readability. So that was one of the changes we made. Really, I don't have anything to highlight, but I could answer any questions that you might have. Typically, we'll just run down the row and go through
Okay.
folks' questions on this.
All right, we'll start with Jan this time.
Thank you. On the first page, on consolidated maintenance, it says that the staff has completed installation of directional signage for all 18 public restrooms along the Embarcadero. This includes the 12 facilities that owned and operated by leaseholders. On the ones that were owned and operated by leaseholders, did the city actually install the signs for them, or were the leaseholders handed the signs and then told to install them? Or, I mean, you're for sure they're installed, is what I guess I'm implying.
We have installed, I think, on all but 2 of the buildings. Where the Hofbrau is, they're finishing up some work there, so we didn't install that. And I can't remember one of the buildings, we need to mount a pole rather than installing it on the building itself.
So the city is responsible for getting them installed, not just handing it to the owners?
We took on that responsibility so that they would make sure that they got put up.
Thank you. And then on the next part, you're going to begin installations of 30 benches and 4 fire pits near the rock. What is the protocol going to be for the fire pits? Just first come, first served, or will they have to reserve them through the Parks and Rec?
No, they'll be first come, first served. We're going to actually start out with, there was concern from our harbor and fire department regarding use of those fire pits. So I think we're going to start out with one and see how it goes. And if it operates well, we'll install. I think we have listed 4 fire pits, but there's actually going to be 3 fire pits. So what we've done, there's 30 benches on both the Target Rock side and the kind of the around the edge of the rock parking lot side. There's a couple of bench cluster locations where we've grouped 3 benches together. There'll be a fire pit. The proposal was to put a fire pit there.
Oh.
So the municipal code talks about fires are allowed in designated locations, but the city hasn't had fire pits for a number of years, and we wanted to give this a try to see how folks react to these
Okay.
and make sure that they don't turn into trash cans.
That's
too.
that was the next thing. Then, on the benches that are out there, are those memorial benches that people can buy for memorial?
Those will be funded through our Memorial Bench program, so they have the ability to have 3 memorial plaques on them. So you can have 3 plaques yourself on there, or go in with 2 friends and each have a plaque on there, or you can reserve a bench completely for yourself and have 1 plaque on it. Okay. So the pricing we haven't gotten all the pricing details yet, but we have quite a waiting list for memorial benches.
Good. Then on the page, on the Choro stream gauge on page 5 of 25, it cannot proceed further until we can respond to the National Marine Fisheries Service resource concerns regarding fish passage and obtain property owner permission. How long have you been waiting? It seems like every meeting I come to, they're waiting to get the property owner permission on this. Is that a standoff or something? So
the property owner is the federal government.
Oh.
Well, the property owner is the RCD. NRCS has a easement over the entire property, so it has to be approved, not locally, but in Washington. They won't give approval until NMFS, National Marine Fisheries Service, signs off on it, and we complete our EIR on the project. So this is a project that started with our permit back in the 90s, I know it wasn't worked on for a number of years, in the 90s and the early 2000s, but I know it started right about the time that I came on board in 2007, 2008, reactivating this. It all relates to the city's permit to appropriate water out of the Choro Creek Basin. So it's a permit requirement by the state board to gauge these streams because there's a minimum stream flow requirement. And if we don't know what the stream flow is, we can't meet that. We don't know if we're meeting that minimum stream flow requirement. So we cannot extract water from the Choro Valley wells unless the stream flow is above 1.4 CFS. One thing that we'll need to look at is those stream gauges come at a pretty high price. I think the estimate right now is about $250,000 for those gauges. Through the One Water process, I think we'll look at that water resource in the Choro Valley and make absolutely sure that that is going to be a viable water source before we spend that money on construction.
Because as long as I've been aware of this, those have been the issues. You couldn't measure it because the water level was too low. Then the National Fisheries has their concerns, and then you have to get the prop. So it's possible that none of these things will ever come together. And
That is in the realm of possibility.
And then what happens?
We can't satisfy that, show beneficial use of that water, so our water right to that water goes away. If we can't show that we're using it, in the eyes of the state who regulates that, then we don't need that water. So we won't have an appropriate right to that water.
Okay.
It's traditionally has been the main water source for the city of Morro Bay. That's where the water district's most productive wells were prior to incorporation.
I was going to say, but if the water level is too low to measure, how can that be the main source?
There wasn't always a requirement for stream flow.
Oh.
So we have a temporary gauge set up, so we can measure we have the opposite problem now. It's not safe for the hydrogeologist to get in the creek to measure the height of the water, so it's flowing too high. But we don't need the water right now, so we won't be using those wells either.
Okay. And then, it just seems like it's going around. But anyway, then on the water operations, you bored a new water line here at Surf Street and replaced a 2-inch steel service with a 1-inch service. Why did you go smaller?
There's no demand in this building to have
see.
that 2-inch service coming in. Maybe if there was fire sprinklers in the building or a bigger kitchen, there might be some demand for it, but that steel service was causing water quality problems because it was old, clogging the water filters coming in the building. So we replaced it with a new PE service. Typically, that would our water department assisted consolidated maintenance in bringing that line over from the meter into the building.
Okay. Okay, those are all I had.
John?
Thank you. A few questions. I was looking at the transit about the new trolley. Curious, who establishes the criteria for the useful lifetime for the vehicle?
Basically, we work with our transit operator and look at typical service life across the industry.
Okay. And then the other question goes, what happens to the old trolley? Is it something which is maintainable and used on a less challenging route, or is it something which we would dispose of?
We would surplus that and dispose of it. One of our trolleys, the original trolley, Molly, is now serving the Avila Lighthouse. So if you still want to ride Molly, you can go down to Avila and ride it up to the lighthouse.
Okay. Then the next one I was looking at, the SLOCOG was unmet needs, public hearing, and I was wondering, were there any Morro Bay requests for unmet needs? It's on the top of the next page, page 5.
Let's see.
Oh, on the bypass.
I actually haven't seen that list yet, so
Okay. All right.
I was unable to attend that meeting, so typically I would hear it up right away. I'm sure that there are, typically every city gets a couple of requests.
Okay. I'd be interested to see what those were.
Okay.
Next one, Choro Stream Gauge. Based on our conversation yesterday, and thank you for the orientation, we would also have to plan on putting some sort of storage reservoir if we wanted to take advantage of that stream again. Is that right?
In the, if we're still on state water and to make best use of that, we need some sort of storage system to store that water so that we can take it when stream flows are high and use it when, in the summertime when we need it, when stream flows are low. A storage tank is probably not big enough to provide adequate storage. We're talking some sort of in-ground reservoir to get enough storage. Probably unlikely at this point in time. If we weren't on state water and had treatment out there where we could take it at any point in time, for example, for peaking, maybe we could make better use of that water. So I think it needs to be assessed in the One Water plan. I don't think we should write it off right away. We should assess some of the options that we might have with that water.
Would a potential reservoir be above where the treatment plant, the WRF?
I think that's highly unlikely. I don't think that property owner is willing to part with that portion of their site.
Okay. Next comment was wastewater collections. Responded to one private sewer lateral blockage and overflow. Was the city reimbursed for that work, or? Because from what I remember, you said that property owners are responsible to the connection to this, up to the connection of the sewer. Is that right?
Correct. We have not sought reimbursement when we respond to private lateral spills. We want people to call us. We don't want that sewage making it down to the bay. Typically, it's placing a couple of sandbags and vectoring up. So we haven't had a lot of expense yet. It might be something we'll want to consider bringing to council as part of our master fee schedule.
So it's not a repair, it's just the emergency response?
It's a response for, we don't actually do the repair. We clean up what's spilled into the street.
And how do you make sure the customer actually does the work?
Our collection supervisor follows back up with them.
Thank you. Okay.
And it's a very rare occurrence. We have had to shut off water once to a customer that couldn't or wouldn't make the repair.
Okay. Farther on down the list, you said you conducted 6 source control inspections at various businesses. Were you looking for like grease traps, or is there a list of things you kind of look for?
Grease traps is our primary. We don't have a required pretreatment program. We do it for operational needs, and grease is the bane of the city's sewer system in the commercial area.
I understand. I knew a guy who was, a sewer maintenance guy who was really thrilled when there was a gas leak and all the grease disappeared for a couple of years. Okay, operations. Would this be a point where you might start discussing the I&I program?
Yes, that is going to be a major point in our, sanitary sewer collection system portion of the One Water Plan. We're hoping to get some quick wins because we have sized the Werf lift station and equalization basin based on a peaking factor of 6. So we're hoping to look at some strategic I&I repairs to reduce some of the sizing into the wastewater treatment plant, hopefully substantially save some costs.
I assume that's going to be the tar paper sewers.
The tar paper sewers and the broken vitrosulfide clay pipe that we have around town that, a lot of our sewer line is below groundwater table, so we see a lot of inflow. In the north end of town, where it's shallow, direct inflow into, perhaps there could be a roof leader or two that is inadvertently connected into the sanitary sewer system. So between flow monitoring and smoke testing early on in the program, we're hoping to identify those and have some good big wins on that.
What color smoke are you going to use?
I don't know.
Thank you.
Could I ask for one question? What's an I&I?
I&I is inflow and infiltration. So infiltration is when groundwater is above the pipe and seeps in through cracks in the pipe. Inflow is when the water is in the street and is above the rim of the manhole and there's holes in the manhole, flows right in, or when somebody has inadvertently connected their rainwater downspouts to the sanitary sewer system, that water flows directly into the system. And we really don't want to treat clean rainwater in our wastewater treatment plant.
I suspect the street I live on, Las Vegas, right now the groundwater elevation's about 6 inches down, and there's a puddle over the sanitary sewer manhole down the street from me.
Yeah, we get almost immediate response at the plant. We went from, during the heavy rainstorm in January, went from about an MGD up to 6 MGD, pegging our flow meter in a couple of hours.
Okay, Chris?
Yeah, I think my only question or discussion topic is on the streets. I know we kind of had to set that aside with the rains. What, or has anything been accomplished so far? I know we started in December and then had to stop, and then did it start up again ever?
No, it hasn't started back up again. The contractor ground off some of the pavement markings, getting ready to slurry, and that's as far as they made it. The anticipated, we did issue a hard notice to proceed, so we're counting days now. We're being pushed off by the contractor because they had other commitments. Well, we're one of their commitments too, and it's almost $1 million in work. We feel we deserve some of that priority also. So we're counting, the contractor has 90 days to complete the work, minus any rain days in the contract. So they're anticipating the last week in February, first week in March to mobilize into Morro Bay.
What's the penalty?
I don't recall what the contract has for liquidated damages penalties.
Stu?
Looks like we're set to do quite a bit of ADA sidewalk repair.
Yes.
Is there a pecking order that's been set up on what we're going to do first, second, third, and fourth?
Yes, we have a proposed plan, basically kind of working out from the institutional needs, making sure we have, sufficient sidewalk to City Hall, the library, community center, senior center, kind of that order, or places where we can close small gaps easily. There may be half a block of sidewalk missing, and we'll pour that in to make that gap closure. Also the priority is curb ramps, to make sure that we have curb ramps in place.
Good.
That brought up a question which I had on this too. North Main Street, what is the plans for completing sidewalks there? Is any of that within the scope of this work?
Not this year's scope. We're prioritizing the downtown and moving commercial area and then moving our way out. There is that section of North Main, kind of south of San Jacinto, and then right by the buoy that needs some work done there also. Realize that. I think we'll wait until the next allocation of CDBG money before we work on that.
Next year?
We actually are going to have to wait a couple of years because we took Atascadero's money because they weren't ready to perform. But it wasn't a gift, it was a loan. So we got $200,000 that we'll use here and then go a couple of years without getting CDBG money that'll go back to Atascadero.
Okay, on
And
page...
I'll bring the plan next time that shows the kind of the order of sidewalks that will include North Main on there, so we can see, approximately when those will get done.
Okay, that's good. Under trees, just over 90 downtown streets and trees, landmark trees were trimmed for hazard and row clearance last month. What's row clearance?
Oh, sorry. I got to remind folks to spell out the abbreviations at least the first time. Right of way. So make sure that we have vertical height above the street and then sidewalk area for pedestrians and tall vehicles.
The nutmeg tank that's up on the top of the hill above me, which I am told causes my water pressure to drop to 15 pounds. How are we doing with that? We had a negative declaration posted a while back. Do we have the money to replace the nutmeg tank or not?
We have the rate revenue that would replace that. What we are in the final throes of is a RFP for design services and to complete the environmental document. So that'll hit the streets probably when Rick gets back from vacation next week. He'll finish that up and get it out to. Then we'll hire a design engineer that'll finish up the design and bring it forward to Planning Commission for the environmental document.
Some of my neighbors have asked me, do we plan on backing the tank up the hill on Nutmeg at the top, or are we going to go around the other way through the dirt up to that?
Probably won't be bringing a tank to the site. It'll be a 1 million gallon tank, so it's a little bit large to deliver. We're looking at options for getting concrete up there. One is to come up the easement directly uphill from Elena Street with a conveyor system, bringing dry concrete up the road and mixing it, batching it on site because we have water up there. Dry concrete is a little lighter than bringing wet concrete up there. But there will be some unavoidable temporary construction impacts due to building the tank.
Noticed that on that there is a generator of some sort in the tank that's right above me on the
At Elena Tank?
Yes.
Yeah, so
What's
there's a
that?
booster station there that feeds the nutmeg zone. So it pumps that water up the hill to the nutmeg tank.
The tank is on county property?
The tank is on private property just outside the city limits. So it's in the county on private property.
Is there any discussion of annexing the property?
We need to look at a couple of things in regards to that property. We lease that 1 acre site, and I think over the years that we've leased it, we probably could have purchased the 200 acre parcel that it sits on. So we'll be working with our city attorney's office on maybe an alternative to, we pay $25,000 a year plus a inflation escalator for 1 acre of rural county property a year.
Last month, there was some talk about the fouling of the filters on the pumps over here close to the bay and so on. Has that been resolved, or what's happened with that?
So we're working on our saltwater wells, making sure that we can actually use those in case of an emergency and have to make water from seawater. We discovered a few things when we were doing the pump testing. The methods of construction that they use to build that saltwater well system left a little bit to be desired. It showed that it was an emergency project put together rather quickly, so we need to make some electrical repairs to those connections to those pumps. And then also, the iron did not come out of solution when we pumped those wells for a long period of time. And we sent samples to the lab to try to figure out what, typically, that iron flashes out of solution as soon as it hits the atmosphere, turns immediately bright red, very thick iron deposits in that water. This time it stayed dissolved. And we don't know if it's temperature related or this is the first year it's rained in 10 years, more creek flow into the groundwater basin, because those wells, although they're saltwater wells, they're still brackish. There is some underflow of fresh water into those, so we're trying to get a handle on something that we didn't expect when we pumped those wells.
On the page 6, there's a comment here about collaboration with city engineering staff on fiber optics contractors for boring project at the city roundabout at Yerba Buena in Maine.
Hopefully not the roundabout, the intersection there. So what we did was one of the fiber companies installed a new fiber line coming through town. They needed to cross the street there near Yerba Buena. They couldn't bore that. They had to do an open cut. So that was that issue there.
Oh, okay. On page 7, we've got a comment here about the effluent flow meter readings became erratic and unreliable because of evidently the wires shorted out there because of heavy rainfall and so on. Aren't those wires covered with little boxes or something to keep the water from getting in there and shorting them out and causing erroneous readings?
Another maintenance issue, we needed to replace those boxes. So the wastewater plant is in a fairly harsh environment. A lot of things decay, and the seals around those boxes failed, so we needed to, got some water in there and needed to replace those boxes and electrical connections for the effluent flow meter.
Down the page a little bit under wastewater, it looks like we're going to have to come up with a projected cost for it so that we can move ahead and address Proposition 218, where we have to go to the public for it. What's going on with that?
So we have costs identified in the facilities master plan for the complete project. We have a proposal from the rate consultant that we used for the last water and sewer rate study. They have the model already developed for looking at rates, so likely we'll go with them. We will conduct public meetings at this board and our WRF-CAC through the spring and go out to Prop 218 vote probably sometime in early summer for that project.
The next page, 9. Wayfinding and signage. What's wayfinding? It's,
Directional signs on how to get somewhere.
okay, that sounds reasonable. Replacement and widening of Toro Creek Bridge is still planned for 2018. Caltrans incorporated in. What's going on with that? That's the 4th paragraph down on.
So this is in the Citizens Bike Committee minutes that you're looking at.
Yeah.
I don't really have any more information on that
Okay.
item, sorry. As you can see, they have a long listing here of what they consider unmet bicycle and pedestrian needs that we'll be working in with SLOCOG to address, whether they're reasonable to meet or not.
Okay, on page 11, tentative schedule for selection process. Do we have funds for that?
That's our next
That's
business
our
item.
next item.
Okay.
Yeah.
Next. That's all I have for this one.
Okay, I have just a couple questions. Now, we just had a 218 vote a couple years ago, was it, or a year and a half ago? Wasn't
Almost
that-
2 years ago now, yeah.
Yeah, was that for a 5-year plan, the 218 vote? And is this, I thought that was supposed to be covering the new.
That was based on the cost information that we had
At
at
that
that time,
Okay.
when Cayucas was also still a partner. Now we know that.
Yeah. Okay, and back on the pothole comment at the top of page 4, I think it is. It says, pothole season, please be patient for repairs as neither hot mix or cold patch can be repaired properly in wet weather. What is the length of time? Since we have a storm coming in just about every week, what is the length of time that's needed for either of those to take place?
So we need dry pavement for.
How dry is dry?
Probably a couple days without, 2 to 3 days without rain. You can do some things to enhance that if it's a small area. Take a torch and heat it up and dry it out for cold patch to get into. The other issue with hot patch is we don't do a lot of hot mix, and this is not paving season, so nobody is going to start up a plant for 4 tons of asphalt. We have to wait until there's a few 100-ton big job before we can get hot mix asphalt.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're
It was a very comprehensive report, and I'm sure the public really appreciates all that information.
And we'll probably stick with this format with incorporating the more details into the report and rather than attaching the raw memos from our maintenance superintendents.
Okay, thank you. Next item on the agenda is B2.
And I know what one of the questions is.
It's the One Water Plan RFP Review Committee. Before we get into this, I just have to say that the title of this One Water Plan, I don't know who came up with this, but it sounds so corny and it sounds contradictory to what it actually is. It's not one source of water, it's all the different sources of water. Is that correct?
It's viewing all of our water, wastewater, stormwater, potable water is one. It's,
Wouldn't it be better to title it Comprehensive Water Plan?
that might be another. We jumped on the bandwagon of all the other cities that are calling
So this
their
is
combined
just-
resource document one water plan.
I was wondering if this is just one of those new popular terms that somebody made up.
Once One Water LA moved forward, everybody had to get on
Okay.
One Water.
Well, let's see, I'll let you now go into this.
Okay, so this is a combination basically of three resource reports that we need to update. Our sanitary sewer master plan, which was last updated in 2006. Our water system master plan, last updated in 1997. And our storm drain master plan, last updated in 1983. And the approach is a comprehensive or one water plan. So looking at them together and combining resources wherever possible. But basically, we will end up with, three CIPs, so capital improvement projects, one for water, one for the sanitary sewer collection system, and one for stormwater. We may have some common elements, so we may look at perhaps one idea would be to try to get stormwater back into the ground for groundwater recharge or saltwater intrusion. That's where those two work together. Looking at our wastewater as a resource for water supply. The other issue is water supply. So council has a goal to look at perhaps local water independence over the next few years. So to reduce our reliance on the state water project for a couple of reasons. Reliability and cost. We have seen just this last weekend one thing that will impact every subcontractor's costs, and that is repairs to Oroville Dam. Every contractor will be responsible for their share of those Oroville Dam repairs. Luckily, there's about 2.6 billion acre feet a year. I think I got this number right. Or, no, not that much. Sorry. 2.6 million acre feet a year distributed through the State Water Project. We are 1,313 acre feet of that. So we don't have a huge share, probably somewhere around a 5% or 5%. Less. No, that's wrong. I shouldn't do math in public. I'm sorry. I have a calculator in my pocket that I could use. It's a fairly small amount of that estimated $200 million repair. Perhaps around $105,000, amortized over 20 years might be somewhere around, $5,000 a year. When you look at that compared to our $2 million annual state water bill, not too bad. There's another project that's floating around California, the $49.5 billion Bay Delta project. We don't know if that's a real project or not, but that's a big number. So that could have a significant impact on state water costs. The state water system is aging. We've seen subsidence in the Central Valley, which is going to increase pumping costs for everybody because the canal has sunk there, so they're going to have to pump more water. So costs are going to continue to go up on state water. We're looking at a WRF project that perhaps can provide additional water supply. We need to look at our groundwater sources and then feed our desal plant into that mix. If you were to review our urban water management plan, on paper, we have more water than we need. Like I said, on paper, we have more water than we need. we need to look at reliability and viability. So is the Choro Basin still a viable water supply? Is state water a reliable source? Those are issues that will be addressed in this one water planning effort. And I'll take the opportunity to answer the question, is there funding set aside? Yes, council budgeted $200,000 from both the water and sewer fund, so $400,000 for this planning effort for this current budget year. So we're looking for either one or two of our board members to agree to serve on the committee that will review the proposals from the consultants and assist us in selecting the most qualified consultant. And I'll get on my engineer soapbox here. We have to remember this is not a bid process. We select based on qualifications and then negotiate a price. So not always do we select the lowest price. We select the most qualified engineer and then negotiate a price that fits our budget. So that, I'll get off my soapbox now on selection for, and that's
Okay.
in California state law.
Okay, so is there any interest from the members of the board to participate on this review committee?
I would ask Rob, what kind of a time frame are we looking at? Is it a year process or a 2-month
No,
process?
I would
or-
say a several-week process. So we're looking to get the proposals back the 24th of February. We would conduct interviews sometime early March. And then award a contract in early April. So typically the involvement is we usually have a interview meeting where we'll go and discuss the various proposals and shortlist the consultant teams. The board member or members would serve on the interview panel doing the interviews, and then post-interview we would wrap that up and make our formulate our recommendation to council.
Is this a proposal that would reap a lot of attention, do you believe that?
We've received interest from a dozen firms that are right now looking at the proposal, see if they want to propose on it. I expect that we'll probably get 6 to 8 proposals out of this from the folks that I've talked to that are very interested in it. I've been wrong before. We've received one on jobs that I thought would be very attractive to consultant firms.
Who would do the mechanical going through, making sure all the RFP requirements are met?
That would be staff, so we'd be looking at making sure that their insurance requirements are in, they have the correct number of pages, that they're a professional engineering firm, meeting all the basic proposal requirements.
Don't they give you a list of, here's my qualifications and I am qualified and the rest of?
Yes, but there's things that we have to check. And then when we get to the end of the process, we need to check their references.
So that's just on the telephone talking, or do we send letters out to the
We
references?
typically do it via telephone.
Okay, so are there any volunteers?
I'm not going to be available that week, then that time frame, so. I will not be available for most of the time during that time frame.
Is the week of March 6th? The week of March?
So that would be the interview process. We'd probably try to cluster, have a pre-interview meeting
Okay.
right near probably the end of February, and then the interviews, and then usually we wrap that up the same afternoon in the discussion.
I'd be, to get involved with it.
Okay. We have one volunteer. Is anybody else interested? And let's draft Steve. Oh. No. I'm okay. Is the board okay to just have Chris participate in this? Any objections? Okay.
No objection.
We'll take it by consensus. You don't need a motion on this, or do you?
No, I don't think we need a motion on this.
Okay.
So, glad to have you aboard again, Chris.
Okay, next item on the agenda is B3, which is, let's see.
Is the annual work plan. We touched on this topic last week, but we really didn't flesh out the details of any items that the board feels that they want on the work plan for next year, and that would be forward on to council to be discussed in your joint meeting. So I've included a summary of our work plan this year, and you'll be seeing this spring bringing these items forward. Probably the last three, the decel location, the one water planning, state water planning, will come in around probably all in the same meeting, having to do with the one water plan. They all relate to that. But you can see the items of the work plan from last year, which basically came out of the city goals. But the council wants to give the boards the opportunity to look at items that perhaps are not on this year's goals, since I believe there was a different strategy. I know there was a different strategy with this year's goals, rather than looking at some of the routine items that we do as a city. They're more of the goals and objectives are more above and beyond those items. So what we're looking for from your board is a discussion on, are there any items that you would like to focus on that we would bring forward to the joint meeting that perhaps aren't encompassed in the goals, but yet they're important to keep an eye on.
Okay, thank you. Any of the members have any suggestions? Or John?
So this list of activities here, that doesn't look like the goals which I seen, is that right?
So in the discussion where it talks about the 16-17 PWAB work program, those were the items that are in this current year in the in your work program that were adopted by council that reflected last year's joint meeting with the city council. So a lot of them are reflective on the objectives in this current year, but some of them are, for example, improved trash collection and public restroom cleaning. That's more of a routine item that you won't see probably in this year's objectives. I know you won't see that. It's an item that is our base mission to do, not above and beyond. So you won't see that. Vehicle replacement program, you won't see that. You'll see things like, one water planning, that'll continue to move forward. Discussion on where harbor maintenance belongs, that you may not even see that in this year's. I believe council wanted that pushed to an outer year to as an objective. Tree trimming. That is more of a routine item. You'll see something coming this spring on perhaps a revision to our current ordinance, more reflective on what the resource agencies, other agencies around us, how they manage their tree trimming during nesting seasons. So things like that are more routine, that won't be part of the goals this year, but are still important to keep an eye on. So, things that I've heard, based on the director's report in past meetings, are that the board has been concerned about is sidewalk improvements. Would be one that we might want to keep on the work program to, talk about, where they're planned, these, to use our CDBG money most effectively. Other items are, the trash collection and public restroom cleaning. That always seems to be an issue that the public is interested in. Won't be reflected in the goals, but it's still an important public works issue.
I got a question, Rob.
Sure.
What ever ended up happening with San Jacinto and Maine? I know they'd brought it back to reverse the old decision of not ever looking at it again. But now it's set aside, I'm assuming, because of Highway 41 in Maine.
So we have a small project there to do green bike lanes improvements to get kind of a improvements, worked with the school and with the Citizens Bike Committee on some interim improvements there. So we'll be looking at doing, that's in our current street improvement contract. The striper won't be here until the end of it, of course. So once the pavement preservation is done, a striper will be coming, and they'll be doing that work there.
Is that more bicycle and just striping related rather than really
Correct.
dealing with the congestion and the
Yeah.
turning and, okay. And from my understanding, Caltrans didn't really want us to do a whole lot there yet, or like such things as doing a no turn on red maybe?
Right,
From,
yeah,
from the freeway side? And
Actually, the person that I was working with has now retired from Caltrans, so I need to find the replacement there.
Rob, did they spend their money up Highway 41 fixing the landslide up there? And does that limit their ability to help us with the roundabouts and work down lower?
I don't know that we're going to get any help from Caltrans on local issues. Perhaps on 41, Highway 1, because it's a state-to-state route, we could see some financial assistance from Caltrans. They view it as a local congestion problem, not as a state problem.
Also, there's different pots of money Caltrans has. One is very limited for the local stuff, and
Right.
then emergency repairs like the slide is entirely different. It doesn't affect.
Right, sorry about that. Yet, John is absolutely correct. They're not taking money out of their local improvement money to do that slide repair.
Oh, good. So we need to come up with a list and ask them, we need a roundabout over there.
Okay, so it doesn't appear that there's any new items that board members want to add to the list to go to council at this time. I'm satisfied with the information.
Were you going to
John?
come up with a new set of bullets, or is it going to be based on the current goals, or are you going to?
It will be based on the new work plan will be based on the 17-18 goals, plus any items that they'll be up for discussion with your joint meeting with council, whether council adds them to the work program or not, will be up to them. But it would be suggestions to add to the, outside of this year's objectives, any items that the board wants to keep focus on, I guess would be the best way to put it.
Streets should, obviously, I say, yeah, I'm working on this board, and guess what they asked me?
Streets, of course.
Streets. And One Water, I guess, covers everything, but are we going to are you going to do the sub things of storm drain, wastewater, the WRF and things like that, or are you going to, because, the bullets on here are, easy for my brain to get around, but if I have to go pick out bullets for the 4 goals, that is, a slower process for me to.
So the goals will be presenting work plan items that deal with the goals and objectives for this year. This was more of an item for anything outside of the goals and objectives that this board might want to focus on. So, streets is on the goals and objectives, but I hear that might be a desire to add even more emphasis onto streets, perhaps even looking more into maybe some more routine measures. So we could make a presentation on our Street Saver program and get maybe a little bit into the details on how we select streets, for example, rather than just be a magic black box that the street names pop out of.
Yes, that is one of the, it's just like, and then public education, is that supposed to be covered under goal, was it 2? Explaining what the constraints we're working with? Goal 3. Are we going to have a public education element in there?
I believe that really every meeting is we take advantage of doing, public outreach and education with. It is an objective of the city, and it is part of our routine, is to make sure that we haven't always been the best at this, and we're trying to strive to be better using more methods to outreach. But I believe that that is one of the main purposes of this body, is to get that information out to the public.
But we've got one public here. So I just, the thought of we may have to have, something more than just a board meeting where we go through the reports there, because, I have the training to understand about 70% of what I see coming through on your report there, but who else is a civil engineer here? Okay, so it's Steve Shively and I probably are but you don't want me explaining anything to the public because I'm an engineer and I'm a numbers nerd. I'm not a communicator. So there probably needs to be some sort of community coordination plan or whatever, or outreach. I think the EPA calls it community outreach plan. But you definitely need to have, if you want to avoid another rebellion, like it's happened a few times the last few years, you really ought to start suggesting to the city manager, is there a community outreach coordinator plan type thing going on?
And that was one of the that's one of the duties of our one of our newer employees. The deputy city manager is coordinating that outreach. Now, he doesn't do it all. He relies on other city staff to do that. And so I've added one thing to perhaps the work plan could be to improve our community outreach with our Public Works Advisory Board. So perhaps we just don't publish the agenda on the city's website. We might use some other methods to get that information out.
I know, I've lived here over 40 years, and there's been thousands of different methods of trying to get information out to the public, and for the most part, the public really isn't interested until something happens to them personally, yeah. And it's, you can try, hopefully we've got several hundred, maybe thousands of people watching this tonight, but besides the number of people that are directly here in our audience. But I know that's the hardest thing. It's been the bane of every council since I've been here. So,
I know,
go ahead.
Is there a way for us to go to the cable company and say how many people tapped into the broadcast?
I don't know the answer to that question.
I hope not.
But there's you do make a lot of attempts. It is on the city website. You get notices in the water bill, and I've said this before. I said, and there are sometimes posters around town. I think short of walking up to each person's house and handing them the information, you don't really get a response. And even if you handed it to them, maybe 1 out of 20 would respond. So that might be promising. So I think that the city makes a good effort at trying to get the information out and having the workshops and trying to get people to know things. It's usually the same people who come, but at least there's participation and there's an effort to get it out there. So I think it's so far doing, you're making a good effort at it. That's what I should.
And we can borrow from what other agencies have done. For example, I don't know if this has an interest to anybody besides me, but other agencies have looked at producing short videos. I mean, even with just your iPhone, filming some street work and having some narration, and then posting that to either YouTube or the city's Facebook site so people could see when you're patching a pothole, what needs to get done. I don't know if that's interesting to, like I said, interesting to anybody besides me.
yeah, the issue is what would be popular with the public in general. And of course, we have a lot of tourists here, no doubt about it. And when you get around the rock, especially, and between the surfing and the rest of it. So what will we do to the parking lot down there to make it more viable? And, I read in some of the publications here that we're talking about leaving the gate shut at the rock. So you don't go out to the far end of the rock, you walk out there. Well, we need to do something with the walking availability out there and so on. And of course, fire pits and so on. So maybe we need one of the things we could talk about is a global plan for what would we do for the rock parking lot in total. And, how would we park the cars down there? How would we get access to the far beach and so on?
Well, I don't go to the rock parking lot unless I absolutely have to, or if it's an off day, but.
Well, that's you. I'm down there
Okay.
2-3 times a week, so.
Let's get back to what we're trying to accomplish here. We're trying to see, are there any new items that we want Rob to present to the council?
Or perhaps not even new, perhaps more routine items. For example, looking at the idea Mr. Skiff brought up, the rock parking lot improvements, public outreach and education plan for public works, and making sure we keep our focus on streets. And perhaps a subtopic of that is how we prioritize the street improvements.
Rob really wants us to specifically tell him something so that he has something to convey. Now, we are also, I can open this up to the public. It looks like somebody out there was wanting to say something. So we haven't done that yet. So we'll now open it up to public comment.
Thank you. My name is Karen Robert, no S, and I'm a resident of Morro Bay. And thank you for all that you are doing. The question I had, and forgive me, I don't have the report in front of me, but it was in reference to the rock parking lot. And you had mentioned that there's probably going to be some benches put in fire pits. Now, they've removed a lot of trash cans, and that, to me, and a lot of other people, has been a public safety concern about they're not necessarily going to the dumpsters. And I was wondering if if those trash cans are going to be replaced, and also there's swelling in the walkway on the Embarcadero. So you're talking about specific goals here, and to me those seem to be really important because it's kind of a public safety issue. So that was my question, and maybe that could be on the list, if it isn't already. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other members of the public, we'll close public comment at this time. And if staff would like to make any comments on those suggestions.
The plan currently is to not replace the perimeter trash cans that we had along the edge of the walkway, but to direct folks to go to the dumpster area to deposit their trash.
And that would be because of what?
Issues with those dumpsters being overfilled and
The trash cans or the dumpsters?
Sorry, trash cans being overfilled. The big belly trash receptacles that were used out there were the wrong item to be used in that harsh environment. They're filled with electronics and mechanical parts, and we put them in probably the harshest spot that we have as far as weather goes in Morro Bay, and they just didn't hold up there. Seagulls getting into the trash cans, so we're going to attempt to try something else and direct folks over to the dumpsters to deposit their trash.
You're talking about the dumpsters next to the building.
restroom.
Yeah.
Is there consideration of moving maybe a dumpster out to the corner out there so they could do that instead of walking over to the restroom and dumping it there, putting them in different places?
Not currently. We're going to dumpsters need to be, and per our code, all trash receptacles, I don't know, are supposed to be screened from public view. Doesn't work with public trash cans, so we need to look at that section of the code and perhaps write ourselves some sort of exception for that. But the plan is currently is to have one trash location for folks to walk their trash over to or drive over to and deposit it there.
Never going to work. Never work.
We could take a thing like they do at the post office. You could have little drop bins, and you could just drive your car up to the edge of it and...
Let's be a little more positive. I think it will be difficult to get to work. Because it's interesting that people will walk miles, but they won't walk, just for a recreation walking miles, but won't walk 10 feet to put something in the trash. And so that might be an issue if you only have one bin or something that...
I've also seen it when we did have trash cans there, people just opening the door of their car and not even getting out of their car to deposit their trash.
I know I've seen some trash bins that are, large capacity where you can't be placing a lot of trash in, something like the bear containers,
right.
Bear-proof ones, where it's not as unattractive as a regular flipped lid dumpster, but it's a much larger capacity, and it can be anchored down, and it can be secured as far as, from seagulls and animals and things like that, that would make it a mess. So I think we should probably explore something like that.
So maybe what this board wants to do is to receive a periodic report as to how this experiment is working and whether we're having to do supplemental litter patrols out there to deal with trash collection, and then perhaps come up with a different plan.
Okay. Any other items for Rob to take forward?
So you'll get another opportunity to talk about this when you have your joint meeting with council.
And whenabouts would that be?
Do I
You
have it in
open the door.
report? I thought I put it in the staff report, but maybe I will get that information to you.
Yeah, I think I've seen the
believe
date
it's
somewhere.
the first week in April.
Okay, well, we'll,
I believe that's when it is, and we have another meeting in between now and then, so perhaps we could just have a much shorter discussion item. I could summarize these, maybe come up with a staff recommended list also that you would have a chance to chew on a little
Okay.
bit more, and we could bring that back for maybe a quicker discussion item next time.
all right, thank you. Next item on the agenda, we've already done B4, is C, potential future agenda items. Now, we have several items listed here. Do you see any of these coming up on our next agenda?
I would see the most likely one would be the bike needs and the ADA improvements plan, since
Okay.
we've now received the completed report from the inspectors, so we could bring that forward.
All right, thank you. Any other last comments from staff?
None
Okay.
for me.
Any other comments, last comments from board members before we adjourn? Okay, then we will adjourn to next Public Works Advisory Board meeting in the Veterans Building on March 15th at 5:30. Thank you.